how would that effect that is, well, even that effect with the Cavendish, it does seem like hard to replicate, and they get different results. Like, it doesn't seem very solid. Like, it does seem like it is kind of a spotty effect at best. Nonetheless, I don't deny that it is there, to some degree. But what are your thoughts on what that could be, or what is actually causing that, and then how they would have then hijacked that into their other theories?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we talked about that. Yeah, it could be that there's one answer for a lot of these devices having their effect. But yeah, electrostatics is one of the things that they're denying, as well as ether and the Machian principle, which even Einstein, I guess, said would be a possibility. And we don't have any. I mean, the gyroscope should be detecting the orbital rotation. You would think as well. So I mean, it's kind of a GG.
So we're denying something? Denying like ether?
No, I'm saying if what we're talking about is a stationary Earth, then the getting rid of the ether would be very important for the paradigm to continue. At one point, with the Michelson-Morley and all that, the interpretation that it actually disproved the ether doesn't seem to be the correct interpretation.
Well, the people who designed the experiment said they got a null hypothesis. So their experiment didn't work to verify what they were trying to verify. So why would you think different to the people that designed the experiment?
What did you think they were trying to verify?
The ether.
It was a motion of the Earth through the ether, right?
Uh-huh.
I thought it was the motion of the Earth through the ether.
You said right, as if you already knew that. Did you? Because you first said they were detecting the ether. So did you want to revise that?
What did you think that when I say detecting the ether, that I needed to say the full outline of the Earth, like the movement of the Earth? Why would I need to say that? We all understand what Michelson-Morley was for. It was for detecting the ether as the cause of the motion, the Sagnac effect.
Well, there's a lot of different interpretations of that, and the mainstream one now goes with it. It eliminated the idea of the ether, but further look into it, doesn't seem to indicate that was the case whatsoever. But.
What were the actual Michelson and Morley?
It was a twofold
their
experiment.
Interpretation?
They were testing the motion of the Earth through the ether. Now they already had the ether framework from magnetism and electricity, so the permittivity and permeability and all that. So they already had the framework for that. So they were going to use that along with the Earth's assumed motion. So when they did their experiment and they didn't get the fringe shift pattern big enough to correspond to the orbital velocity to confirm Earth's orbital motion around the sun, they said, they had two options, right? They were either the Earth's at rest or the Earth's moving and there's no ether. So they went with no ether, and they just assumed the
I don't
motion.
think they did either. Didn't they then do Michealson-Gale and Michealson-Gale-Pearson continue doing experiments set up in different ways with different variables?
No.
Well, yeah.
No, it's even worse for you guys actually on that for Michealson-Gale. Let me pull up the presentation and show you what.
No, just wait for a sec. Just wait. Okay. So you said that they assumed that it was Earth's rotation without ether.
No, we're talking about orbital velocity around the sun. For Michelson-Morley.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I meant. Yeah, so you said that they just went with that explanation, but they didn't. They then did follow-up experiments to see what it was, like what the cause was.
No, so they did, but they changed the scale of interpretation to fit the sidereal.
What does that mean?
I'll explain. So what they did at first,
just a term. What does scale of interpretation mean?
So what they did at first is they interpreted each fringe pattern. They said it was going to equal 5 kilometers a second for the velocity. They measured just over one fringe pattern, so 5 kilometers to 7.5, right? So not enough to hit the 30. So what they did later in 1913, Sagnac did his interferometry thing, and then in 1924, Michealson-Gale-Pearson was done. Let me pull up the thing for that real quick. Show you what they did. what they did for Michealson-Gale-Pearson is they just removed the scale that they came up with of interpretation for Michelson-Morley. So instead of the fringe shift patterns equaling, what's it called, 5 kilometers a second, they just reinterpreted it to the sidereal rotation of Earth, and it fit with 98% accuracy. And the mathematic framework that they used to derive that effect was an ether framework with, which basically just means, in layman's terms, what they used was a reference frame in which they could measure the relative speed, against the stationary object instead of like relative motion.
Sorry,
so to speak.
how is that ether?
Hang on 1 second,
Frame-
buddy. 1 second, buddy. So what the framework that they used is that they were comparing the speed of light traveling along the east-west pipes. I'm sorry, the east-west pipes and the north-south pipes. And what they found was the east-west pipes were showing that's where the fringe pattern was coming from. So they just reinterpreted that into general and special relativity without any means. So when the Sagnac effect was discovered, it showed a fringe shift pattern, right? So remember back to Michelson-Morley, right? What they did was they said that it was a null result because it didn't give the results that they needed. So they were trying to dismiss it. They said, oh, it was instrumental error. What it actually proved was that the speed of light is invariant. So with that presupposition of the invariant speed of light, that's where Lorentz came in and said, hey, maybe there's an ether and it's like there's a length contraction that's going on. And that's what caused the slight fringe shift pattern to give the illusion that there's a varying speed of light. And then with that length contraction, they reverse engineered how much of the apparatus would need to be contracted to produce the quote unquote null result, right? So they back engineered it on the presupposition that the new framework of interpretation with an invariant speed of c, special relativity, was the answer to measure Earth's velocity without actually measuring it. And then in 1913, Sagnac came along with his rotating interferometer. Now this is the same exact experiment as Michelson-Morley. It's just the device rotates while it's running instead of being positioned, and then a measurement's taken and then it's repositioned. This is just spinning the whole time. So they said that okay, this fringe shift isn't a problem here because it's a rotating device. It's a non-inertial frame. So special relativity doesn't apply, no conflict there. All good or whatever, right? And then Michelson-Morley is the same thing as a rotating interferometer, or I'm sorry, Michealson-Gale-Pearson is the same as the Sagnac experiment, which is the same as the Michelson-Morley. It's just they added an extra mirror, so they made a square instead of a triangle. And instead of rotating, it was stationary and fixed. So from that, they, like I said, they just, instead of applying the scale of interpretation to get the orbital velocity, they just removed that and applied the sidereal rotation and found that it matched, relative to the latitude. Now, when you get into the 2004 experiment done by Ruyong Wang, where he shows that using a conveyor belt in a linear, a linear interferometer, he cancels out the so-called effective Earth's rotation, creates a lab rest frame, an actual rest frame, so to speak, and from that the effect still persisted. So what he showed is that the Sagnac effect is not dependent on Earth's rotation. It's dependent on something else. And with the lab reference frame, the stationary reference frame, in the experiment, what he showed is that it's not only directionally dependent, but it's with respect to a stationary Earth. So the ether wind is with respect to a stationary Earth. The effect that's causing the varying speed of light is with respect to a stationary Earth. That's what's been experimentally proven time and time again. And all these experiments were replicated by Dayton Miller 5,200,000 times, showing a fluctuation with the equinoxes to the day where the fringe shift patterns changed slightly, reaching their minimum and maximum dimensions, in fluctuation with how the speed of the sun would have to change to maintain its 15 degrees per hour on a flat Earth. As it gets closer in the northern hemisphere, it slows down. As it goes in the south, it speeds up. I rest my case, Your Honor. Thank you for being quiet. I know that was a lot, but there's a lot of prerequisite information in there that you have to understand before you just rapid fire questions and don't have a full, complete understanding of the situation. Thank you.
Well said, bro. Oh, dogs. I don't know. Oh, he was. Yeah, you were just muted for interrupting, man. So now that you've heard, if you want to respond, or
Yeah, I can't respond to an entire Gish gallop. That's why I wanted to go point by point.
it wasn't
Well, go ahead and ask your questions.
Yeah, it's not.
Okay, so you're saying the one-way speed of light
hold
is
on real
very...
quick. Hold on, man. I'm just muting you for a second just to say that that's not valid to call that a Gish gallop. It actually was an introduction to the topic. He came in to begin to lay out the foundations of what need to be discussed because, so anyways, but yeah, carry on.
Okay, so the one-way speed of light you're saying was measured to vary, and that invalidates the two-way speed of light. Is that what I gathered from everything?
One-way speed of light is measured in GPS. That's a separate issue from the interferometry experiments, those being two-way speeds. But yes, in both instances, the speed of light varies, and it should be the same in all reference frames, especially when Einstein introduced the principle of general covariance with general relativity, and that really broad stroke swept in all reference frames. So in special relativity, I think there's a couple.
Are you going to do the Gish gallopy thing again?
I was going to fully explain the extent of everything so that you could fully understand it and have a grasp of the information so that you could, ask questions about it and continue on.
Yeah.
Like if you haven't understood the measurements of how interferometry works and you're still confused about the one-way and two-way speed, like we still have a lot of work to cover, you know what I'm saying? So it's not like fun for me to wait for you to interrupt me to not have a coherent argument or understand the point.
Yeah, I did mute him real quick because he just came in with more kind of attacks. But
I'm sorry. You muted me so that Alan could just insult me. That's all he was going to do?
No.
Well,
why don't you just make Alan go through the discussion?
You're just going to continue calling it Gish gallopy. You were already warned about that.
I think everyone would like to hear what Alan has to share. So, I mean, dogs, if you want to contribute in some way that actually is supportive, then okay. But otherwise, I think everyone would like to hear the information.
Well, how about this? How about I ask questions and Alan just answers the questions instead of what he's been doing?
Okay, that would be good. But so far
Awesome.
you've come in with ad homs and other things. So yeah, if you want to just go right to that, then that's fair.
Okay, so I want to go back to Michealson-Gale. So what part of that validated the ether?
But there's a varying speed of light. So if there's a varying speed, that means it's being set by something. So
okay, so that's why I asked about the variant versus invariant speeds of light. So the one-way variability of light, there's no problem with that with relativity, is there?
Yes.
Okay.
It can't vary. Do you understand that? It has to be the fixed speed that they say it is. It can't fluctuate. It's a constant.
Only if there's no motion and the light's not going through an atmosphere. That's why they do the two-way speed test. So if the Sagnac effect, if we're on a rotating frame, then that light can vary in its one-way speed because speed is distance over time. And if the distance changes one way and not the other, or changes differently for the two paths of light, then you can get variance between the speed in those paths of light, even if the actual speed of light is constant in whatever reference frame. So like an unmoving vacuum with no gravity, right? You understand all that?
Okay.
No.
I'm just gonna say, just for moderation, I'm gonna just mute you dogs in between because you do tend to interrupt Alan. So you said your piece, thank you. I'm just gonna do temporary muting. It's not to shut you down, obviously. It's just to keep it clean, the audio. So I'll just unmute you when Alan's finished. That way he can actually speak uninterrupted. So yeah, go ahead, Alan.
Yeah. So let's just step away from the refractive index for a second. There was experiments done where they say the GPSs those GPS satellites are in space, and what they did was circling the globe. They had 4 satellites positioned where they basically made a big interferometer out of the vacuum of space. And in that propagation, they found that the speed of light is slower by 14 nanoseconds going west to east, and faster going east to west by 14 nanoseconds. So the interferometers are the really good ones, the high-end ones now have a really low refractive index. It's, I forget the exact numbers, but it's like 99.99999, the speed of light or whatever they say. It's already factored in and calculated, so that's not the issue that's at hand here.
All right, go ahead, Doc.
Okay, I've said this to you a couple of times, Alan. The speed of light is calculated over time and distance, right? That's how you calculate speed. So the amount of distance that light carries over a certain amount of time will give you the speed of light. Now, if it's in a vacuum, unmoving, no other effects on it, it'll be a constant speed. But because, and your big interferometer thing out in space actually kind of showed this, because we're on a rotating Earth, we see the speed of light vary one way because the Earth is in motion. You understand that, right? And those satellites would have been in motion as well. So do you understand that?
You have a fundamental misunderstanding of special relativity and how it applies to the speed of light. The speed of light is independent of the source and the observer, so it shouldn't change. In the case of this satellite experiments, the satellites are in a different reference frame. They're not dependent on the Earth rotation, so they shouldn't be affected by any of the conditions you set forward. And there was one other thing, I can't remember now. It was... What was the other experiment? I can't remember. You can continue. That's not the issue, though.
All right, but you didn't address the fact that speed is calculated.
Sorry, here we go.
Time.
I got you. I got you on an even better one. So in the case in GPS, using the range measurement equation in the ECI, if you have two recipients, one stationary and one moving, right? The delay in which, or I'm sorry, when the moving one intersects with the stationary guy, the signal delay is proportional to the moving observer, directly proportional to his speed. So the speed of light is affected by the observer as well, or I mean by the velocity of the observer. That's another body bag too. So even in the case in which you're talking about, there's an even greater correction necessary proportional to the velocity. It's like that's another direct violation. And just for a quick refresher, Einstein's first two postulates are that all reference frames are equally valid, meaning that the speed of light would be the same in all reference frames, and two, that the speed of light is the same in all inertial reference frames. And this variance that's being shown here is antithetical to the presuppositions of the not presuppositions of the postulates put forward, because they're untrue in nature.
Dude, before Dog's response, I was just going to say, I just, in my mind, as you were speaking, I was like seeing that correlation in a way between with what's the star observations, because just in terms of like with those measurements where it's different when they're moving versus stationary. Like there's actually a difference between how the signals are sent between them, whether they're in motion or not, and how that correlates with all of that. It's not like a direct mirror of it, but it just reminded me of the way that with the time lapse with the stars and the airplane, how that is different, on which one's actually moving and how that reveals that.
All right, so I'm going to do this again. Speed is distance over time. So if whatever is the light starts from somewhere and goes to somewhere, if wherever that emitter and receiver is and whatever the path of that light is somehow has some motion applied to it, it'll change the one-way speed of that light. That's just a fact. Like, you can't get around that. That's just how speeds work, Alan, okay? So every single thing you've brought up so far has validated the fact that while light may have a constant speed, if there's any motion applied to the emitter, receiver, or the path of the light at all, it can vary. And Einstein was happy to admit that, right?
No, his postulates are formed completely opposite to what you said.
But that's what the Sagnac effect was, right? And Einstein was happy to include the Sagnac effect as like a valid scientific theory that he accepts, is the idea that if the Earth is in motion, then the one-way speed of light will be measured different.
No, they actually had no explanation for it for a while. It took 8 years before Paul Levine made a special metric tensor to account for angular momentum on the small scale. Basically, what he said was that the energy of the rotating device was equivalent to producing enough gravitational influence to make length contraction and time dilation happen in small intervals to produce the effect. That's how they tried to incorporate it. Now, when you get into the metric tensors they're derived from the Einstein space-time interval and not from the field equations. So those are a separate issue in and of themselves that also invalidate the general principle of covariance because they're first order intrinsic invariant differentials, meaning that they're basically just mathematical fallacies to give the appearance of mathematics and covariance. But that's a little bit much for this situation. But to answer your question, no, it's antithetical to special relativity. And what Wang proved by linearizing the effect is that it's not dependent, or that he made it apply to special relativity, thereby invalidating it, because he showed that in an inertial reference frame there's a speed of light and it's directionally dependent east to west. The framework has been completely invalidated inside out in your lack of understanding of the framework, and reasserting the same question isn't like, I don't want to do that anymore. So if there's like another question or different subject, like I'd like to move on.
I don't want to move on from this because I don't think you've actually dealt with what I keep telling you. I keep telling you that speed is calculated by distance over time. If the emitter, receiver, or the path of light are in motion, then that would mean that the speed of light will be different depending on that like the motion that is happening. So when you have these satellites that have that bias, what is an east to west bias, that are basically large ring interferometers, when they have that bias fits the rotation of the Earth, right? Because if the Earth is rotating, the satellites are geostationary in orbit, then they would be rotating that direction, same direction as the Earth, which would mean that the light would it would have a different time to go a distance, because the path and the emitter and receiver are all moving. So there's added distance, or there's distance taken away from the path that the light must take over a certain amount of time. And so that would allow for the invariance, or allow for the variance, while also meaning that the speed of light may be invariant, like if it's not in a moving reference frame and if it doesn't have to go through certain things. So you understand, Alan, you're not addressing my contention here, which is that like speed is distance over time.
The measuring stick of the finite fixed speed, invariant constant of speed, c, that assumed speed, is used as a measuring stick in a reference frame that's stationary and non-rotating, that derives a distance by taking a snapshot of the time that the signal was sent and when the signal was received, using synchronized clocks that also account for the Sagnac effect and nothing else. So this is a first order measurement. Do you understand what that means? This is the highest degree of measurement. It assumes it needs no corrections. It makes no assumptions. It just boom, instantly accurately derives the distance. And what's been found is that that the speed is saying that it's proportional to the velocity of the observer. So it's changing based on the motion of the observer. That can't happen at all in special relativity. If you don't understand the postulates and you keep asking it, then yeah, it's going to seem like I'm not addressing it, but that's completely on your end. We should get like maybe a secondary opinion or something before we keep rehashing the same thing.
Before I unmute dogs, would anyone else like to contribute in terms of their reflections, as Alan just mentioned? In terms of a reflection on that in any way?
Yeah. Does it appear as if his question has gone unanswered, or that I'm misunderstanding it or anything? If anyone would like to weigh in, please confirm or whatever, because, we should move on.
All right, yeah, I'll unmute. By the way, dogs, dude, ideally, I would like to not have to mute and unmute you. Here's what I'll just say real brief.
Gio, I don't care. Can I just say this?
Hold on, I know you don't care, but I'm going to say it anyways. Okay, I know when Alan's done, because I then unmute you. So ideally, you should just know when he's done. You know what I mean? And just not interrupt. And when there's a long enough pause, like a good 2-3 seconds, it's obvious someone's done. No one's in a rush. We don't have to cut each other off. 2 seconds is not going to change anything. So I'm just saying, I know when he's done, which is why I've been muting and unmuting you. And it's the only way this audio can be clean without interruptions and all of that. Sometimes it happens by mistake because you think the person paused or whatever. But I'm just saying, I know when he's done. So if you just did that as well and waited for at least a good 2-3 seconds, I wouldn't have to mute and unmute you because I'm doing other stuff right now and would prefer not have to do this. But I do want the audio to be clean and for Alan not to be interrupted so everyone can hear. So anyways, just wanted to say that ideally, if you could consider that, it would be appreciated and would save me having to do it to sit here and click and mute and unmute. Coach
Okay, so the speed
said he'll help. So yeah, go ahead.
So the speed of the observer would change the speed of light because the distance would increase from when the light was emitted to when the light is received because that observer is moving a distance. So the distance as part of the speed equals distance over time would change, which would mean that the speed would vary. And nowhere in relativity does it say that can't happen. It doesn't say that like motion is nullified by light somehow. It never says that, Alan. So do you agree that what I just explained, that the distance of the observer from point A to point B on the time the light took to get from the emitter to the observer would change the speed of light calculation?
No, I linked Einstein's paper there. You can read it.
I'll write it in chat for you then. I'll actually do the calculation in chat for you, and then you can understand, okay?
By the way, Alan, dude, shout out for that debate that you guys did on Modern Day Debate, man. That was on point, and they kept it pretty civil. And yeah, the interruptions were to a minimum, so that was great, man. If that you were able to lay all that out, and that was spot on. So I just wanted to send
Thanks, man.
props, bro. Yeah.
Should I watch that? Who were you with, and who did you who was it up against?
Troubling Tribune and I versus some guy named Akil and some lady named Jin. The one guy showed up to the debate, and his tactic was just to ask questions and socially shame us and call us terrorists. And the other lady subscribes to a philosophy that says that you can't make a measurement and you can't tell, anything objective about reality. And she had no evidence or anything to put forward either. It wasn't really a debate. I wouldn't watch it. It was super boring.
Yeah, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I like skimmed through it. I basically just went to the parts you guys were talking and watched those parts.
Yeah.
And I watched a little bit of the other ones, but I know the Jen from before, and then the other guy, I didn't even watch much of what he was saying, to be honest.
Yeah, every time he talked, I would just mute and then talk to the boys on Discord and have a good time in the background. And then when it would go back to like when Ryan's face would pop up, I would unmute real quick to see if I had to respond or something. Because like he was just saying nonsense, like, the moon landing, standing on the backs of giants, et cetera, et cetera.
So speed equals distance over time. If you change any of the variables, you change the speed, right? So if the distance between the emitter and the observer changes over the time it takes for the light to get from the emitter to the observer, the time will also change, which will then change the speed. What about that doesn't make sense?
Speed of light is fixed. When they take the measurement, the first order measurement in the ECI reference frame, it reveals that it's not the fixed speed that they say it is. This is further verified when they transform that distance to the ECEF reference frame. It should be an invariant transformation because C is a fixed speed and GPS is a synchronized time system synced to GPS time. The transformation has to absolutely be invariant to be in compliance with Lorentz covariance. If it is not an invariant transformation, that means that special relativity is not true and there's a varying speed of light outside of the confines of how you think you understand it.
Okay, so none of that addressed what I said. That was you just going through another script, okay? I understand that's what you do, but I'm doing this for everyone else, okay? So speed equals distance over time. If the distance increases, the time will increase, which means the speed will be different, okay? That doesn't mean that Einstein's special relativity claim that speed is invariant is incorrect, because when he says speed of light, he's talking about the hypothetical the actual speed of light if it was not dealing with any sort of inertia put on it, if there was no inertia on the emitter and receiver, and if there was nothing to change the path of the light as it moved through, say, an atmosphere or something like that. So when we say the speed of light difference for things like GPS, we're talking about the time and the distance covered by the light, but the light is always moving at its same velocity. So maybe you're just confused about the term velocity and the term speed.
Negative.
Wait, can I just say something real quick? Isn't the speed of light supposed to be the same in all reference frames?
Yes.
So I could have a reference frame that's moving 3 miles an hour to the left, and one reference frame that's just solid and still, and the light in either reference frame would still be the same, but the lengths and times would actually have to contract and I guess stretch to basically conform to that speed of light. Am I correct about that?
Yes. That's how they redefine the interpretation of Michelson-Morley. They said that
No, it's just a change of distance over time.
Yeah, so
I
essentially,
think, Alan was in the middle. I don't know. Dogs, I guess he just needs to be muted every time because he interrupted you again. Did you want to finish, Alan?
Nah, man. I mean, you can literally just read the screenshot I posted of his postulates. The light's independent of the motion of the observer, so it shouldn't
Right.
affect it, but it does affect it. And then so like GPS is a little too confusing or whatever, I guess. So let's bring it back to Wang's interferometer, right? So it's a known distance of 1,000 meters or whatever, right? So the linear length of it, and then it's moving on a conveyor belt. So it's not traveling through anything else or anything like that. And the quote unquote inertial effects of Earth's rotation are canceled out, and yet the effect persists. There's no situation in which you can, I mean, only through the failure of understanding how like the postulates can you even continue to, do this line of questioning.
So again, like let's say that I'm on a train and I have a constant velocity on that train of something like 50 miles an hour, something like that, okay? And the speed distance for that train is calculated off distance and time. So if I've got a constant velocity on this train, like you can change the distance to the next station, which will mean the time will take longer to get to the next station, which means the speed of the train will be different, but the velocity will be the same. Like if the station or whatever I'm trying to catch up to changes, then in relation to that thing, the speed has changed, even though the velocity is constant. So I think I've solved this, and you just don't understand the difference between velocity and speed. Like you can have a constant velocity, but if it's in a reference to something else that's moving, then the speed will be calculated differently because speed is distance over time.
yeah, but the problem is, doesn't the distance actually change so that the speed of light is the same in both reference frames, but in one reference frame, the length is actually contracted or stretched. So it's not actually going the same distance, but it is going the same speed. That's special relativity.
Well, I think he dropped out of the VC, so yeah, we can carry on unless Kosho wants to respond. But we could carry on with another.
I was gonna make fun of no real quick. I just had special ed relativity.
Nice.
Respect, Kosho, respect.
No, I think you've been on point though. No, I think that's it's a good representation though.
Thank you, sir.
I try to make a lot of steel men in my off time.
Yeah, there's gotta be. There's a lot of tin men. The tin man would be like the halfway between a straw man and a steel man, and I think there's a lot of tin men going on.
Yeah, Tin Man is like it was. Is that a real thing, or is that like
No,
a lighter,
Let's
kind
just-
of weaker version of a steel man?
Well, there's the straw man, the tin man, then the steel man, and then there's the titanium man. So yeah, that's what we should go with. It's a spectrum.
that's what I always think of, because I always hear people trying to tin man, trying to steel man, and it's like halfway of a strong man. So I always think like that's more like a tin man. I don't know. That might be a thing already, but it's just.
Hey, Kosho, real quick, did you understand why dogs are gods kept re-asking the same question and didn't understand what Alan said? Did you understand what his point was? Did you get why he was confused?
Can I be frank?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, he's a little more frank than I am. I just want to say, no comment.
Oh, dude, if you want to comment on it, I mean, that's what it sounded like to me. He was reiterating something that he kind of a foundational thing that he thought was the case, but he didn't seem to actually be listening to what Alan was saying and like responding directly. Like it was in the same kind of category of ideas, I guess, but he didn't seem like he was actually responding to it directly or actually engaging it forward. So, I mean, what is your reflection, or do you have a way to move it forward from there?
Oh yeah, like what would your any objections to what Alan was saying on your end, Kosho?
There's no point to ask me because I don't. There's certain people I don't really like to put my we're like. I'll just go and say, like Brenda is another person where I like, even though we're arguing at the same time, I don't really like to.
What about your own objections?
No, that's fine. You don't have to.
Argument.
I know you don't have to have it. It's not like he tagged you out and you're on the same team. I understand, but I'm just, yeah. Do you have something to add?
Honestly, I mean, I'd like to talk with Alan at another time about this stuff because I do have a lot of comments about we talked a little bit about GPS and he's got some stuff with Einstein and relativity and all that. I don't know if my criticisms would, like I said, would be in line with dogs, but I do have there is dialogue I could have with Alan about this stuff. It's just I wasn't really listening, so I was like, I can't really add to it.
Hey, Kosho, what about this?
I wasn't on either side of that.
What about this? That there was an argument that you were afraid was going to end the flat Earth conversation, and I was trying to explain to these guys what you were talking about, but I didn't really understand exactly what you were getting at with that that evidence that you were afraid to bring forward because the conversation would end.
Was GPS?
Was it GPS? I don't know. Was it GPS?
Yeah, GPS.
Oh yeah, you do have that. So I understand that there's probably a lot that you could discuss with Alan. So if you're saying that like you're not ready for a 5-hour marathon, that's understandable. But yeah, if it is linked to that, perhaps you could reflect upon that. If Alan hasn't heard what your thoughts on GPS in that way.
What's your quick indication on that? So Alan could maybe start a conversation.
Well, no. To be honest with you, that would be a conversation with Alan. To be honest with you, I'm trying to sleep with my girlfriend tonight, and so can't talk for very long. But
I'll get in the shower.
His priorities are weird. Then yeah. All right.
I fucked that up before. Though, Gia. You know that. And the thing is,
we got it. I know. Go ahead.
Does your woman have a sausage, Kosho?
She got other priorities. So I'll tell you this stuff.
A sausage and a wig.
I'll tell you this much.
Coach has limited time. No more jokes.
Is
that it's all right now?
Yeah, with Alan though, because Alan, my conversation with Alan about GPS would be separate than because obviously what I said about what would end the debate would be using GPS, differential GPS, in order to make straight lines and to make like perfect precision points. But I think even that's separate than Alan's argument, because what we're talking about there is like using GPS to use precision, centimeter precision points, which could be the case on a flat Earth or globe. Okay, so just to be clear, what I'm saying about GPS that could end the debate is separate than what Alan's talking about. Alan's talking about that GPS actually itself is evidence for the flat stationary Earth, where I'm saying that regardless what GPS is, you can use GPS to get these precision points, make these straight lines that you can do force aligned and all this other type of stuff. Like see if buildings are tilting away and that kind of thing. So I just want to say that's slightly different, but I hope that didn't confuse anything in the perspective.
Well, I mean, that is directly connected though, man, because I mean, you kind of almost like steelmanned what you may or may not think Alan is or is not saying, but I mean, what you're saying is connected to validating it as being some valid way to get the accurate points to measure the shape of the Earth. But yeah, go ahead.
So with the invariance distance transformation in the new reference frame, who knows what the corrections could be? So they could easily cook in reciprocal zenith angles for cities and stuff like that, like you were saying, over distances, and you wouldn't be able to verify that after the fact, because the initial measurement itself already already provides a first order measurement of the distance, right? So it should be invariant. So the fact that it's not, like, who knows what they do after the fact and what changes are made and what coordinate system, in terms of like the map that they're, referencing to get the results. Like it could easily be cooked in with that now. They've already corrected a
Oh,
first order measurement. So it's kind of first order evidence, I guess, would kind of be off the table for you.
Boom.
I just want to show you. I want to show you that I'm not bullshitting. No, like this is me in a private dialogue with this guy. He works at the geo spatial science whatever in Australia. His name's Carl Wang. And you can see this is a private dialogue I'm having with him. He's like the go-to guy for the data that comes from those guys. But it's just crazy that me and Alan, we both have a GPS guy named Wang. That's really funny.
But did you get what Alan was saying? Like, essentially, I mean, I don't
Yeah.
want to speak for him, but I mean, the fact that the way that is laid out, it could be. I mean, this is just a word I'm using. No, your mic's open.
Sorry.
Like that, it could be like, I'm just saying this from my perspective. I'm not saying Alan said this, but I am relating it to my understanding of what Alan said. That essentially, it can be like patchworked or like hodgepodge. Like it can be adjusted within that system. And so, in terms of getting valid first order measurements, Kosho, how would you then respond to that? Because especially perhaps if you heard more of how the whole thing is functioning, or what you think, or how your understanding of it is functioning, and how would your understanding of it be different than Alan's? That somehow you're saying that it could be used for first order measurements in this way, and what he just described is showing how it can't be.
Well, I mean, first of all, it wouldn't matter if that were the case. It's not the case, but if that were the case, it can still be used to find these precision measurements, which can be used to otherwise prove one way or the other. Do you mean the gist of what you said one more time? I'm sorry, I was listening, but yeah, go ahead. Give me the gist one more time, just a little bit.
Is there a way Alan could actually just explain this for the layman?
Yeah, explain for the layman. There you go.
Because I'm gonna be honest, it all sounds very interesting, but makes no absolute sense to me.
Gotcha. So the signal propagation time from distance, or from the time that the signal was sent to the time it was received, is a first order measurement, and it's synced to GPS time, right? So based on the fixed speed of C and GPS time, the distance derived should be invariant under any coordinate system transformation. So traditionally, the way you would derive distance would be two locations on a coordinate system, and then you would use whatever unit of measurement to measure the distance in, whatever units is between those two positions. Now, the difference with GPS being a time interval system is that it uses the fixed speed of C as a measuring stick, as like a stopwatch, basically, right? So when the signal is sent, there's a timestamp created, synced, with GPS time, and when the signal is received, that's also in sync with GPS time, and the distance. The time it takes for that signal propagation to reach its recipient is multiplied by C, and that's where they get their variance. Now, that measurement will correspond to either a slightly faster variation to C, being what's it called? Like if they're actually stationary on Earth, but you know how you guys think you're rotating. So there's a slight variation to see on that. And then if you're moving, like, in a train or on a bus or whatever, the velocity of your motion is added to it as well, or is added to the delay. And this could be noted by having a stationary observer and a moving observer, and at the time of intersection, even though the distance is the same, the time interval will be different for them, thus giving a different distance. Now, the distance derived from that should be an invariant transformation to any other coordinate system because it's synced at the same time and using a constant distance. And when they transform it to another coordinate system, the distance isn't inaccurate anymore, and they have to apply corrections again. So they have to make first order corrections to a first order measurement, which is it's over.
I was saying, I wish I could talk to you more about this in depth, but actually, what you're saying, what happens is the moment that it's received, the reference frame of the person receiving it is reference frame where the clock of the craft that it was sent from is being described. So let's say, for instance, the message is received, in which case what's received is a time interval of when it was sent is also received. And that time interval, or that time that it was sent, it's actually like it's like a second and a half interval. But that time interval that it was sent was in the frame of where it's received. If that makes sense. So what's being described is the position of the craft in the frame of the person who's receiving it. The position of the craft from that frame at the time that it's received. And I know so it seems like there's multiple like moving reference frames and all this type of stuff, but when you think about it in that way, it's all being described in a stationary frame, like in a single moment. And so there is relativity that's applied to make corrections, but it's not applied in that way. Like that measurement is actually made in a in as if it was as if that was a stationary event, because it can't be made that way. And like I said, I wish I could, because it might sound confusing, but I wish I could explain it more.
It's quite
Give
the
me a second.
opposite. GPS is a time interval system. So the way you're describing distance, the way to derive distance is the traditional sense, which I was talking about earlier, being at a moment in time. This is not what GPS is, being a time interval system. Furthermore, the invariant speed of light nullifies any sort of ad hoc corrections where it's like length contraction, time dilation, gravitational potential, that sort of thing. Because the speed of light is varying, the postulates upon which special relativity are formed are invalidated. So saying that additional relativistic corrections are needed to accurately derive this are untrue. In fact, GPS clocks are synchronized using a math equation that's equivalent to the Sagnac equation, which is equivalent to the range measurement equation, which is equivalent to the linear equation used to derive the Sagnac effect. These with that being said, and the fact that the effect is directionally dependent, shown experimentally in 2004 by Wang, there's no possible chance to claim relativistic corrections after this first order measure. The fact that this first order measurement needs corrections means that no relativistic correction could explain it. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but let me be clear about where the corrections come in. The corrections only come in, as far as I understand, are clock corrections, meaning that the clock that the space vehicle or the satellite is transmitting the signal, and the clock that your phone or your receiver, which is going to be less accurate, is receiving that. These clock corrections between these two, this is where the relativistic corrections come in. But the actual, so the position of the receiver and position of the transmitter when it was transmitted, and the time it was transmitted, all these kind of things, this is all in the same frame of the frame of the receiver. And you can understand this because the uh, the clock. So once it was transmitted and once it was received, like this frame there's not like some co-moving whatever. Like the signal has already left the craft and it's already headed towards the receiver. So everything is stationary at this point. All that's happening is being received. So there's, like I said, the only relativistic corrections that come in is the corrections between the time the clocks are actually computing between themselves. But there's no corrections that need to be made relativistically, uh, due to that transmittal or whatever. So you can use the position that the craft is telling you it's at and the time that it takes to get to you. You can use that as an actual time, and the corrections are only, like I said, in relationship to from the two clocks.
It's a first order measurement that requires no relativistic corrections. It doesn't, like, the fact that it requires additional corrections under transformation just undermines everything you just said.
What do you mean?
Like, I know, yeah. So there's rules for transformations. And if you have a time interval system, so you have a synchronized set time and you're using C as your measuring stick, that C can't vary, right? And the fact that it does means that the postulates for special relativity aren't true. The postulates being that the speed of propagation is independent of the source or the observer. This was
Right.
also shown experimentally by weighing outside of GPS just using interferometry. This is actually shown in all interferometry.
All right. And this is what I mean though, is that way of thinking about it, it makes it very complicated and it's not necessary. Like that's right, but that would seem like you'd be like, wait a minute, you got to think about this and like, but you don't have to think about it like that. The moment that it leaves the craft, like from the frame of the observer, there is a time that is attached to the message as it's sent from the craft, and that is on the message. And so as it reaches the receiver, he's getting that time from his frame that it left the craft. So from his frame, he can describe the time it took to get to him. So when it comes to relativistic corrections, there's no variant of the speed of light that's required to determine that. You just determine the time it took and the normal speed of light from your frame. And the only, like I said, the only relativistic correction that needs to be made is the difference between the way your clock is perceiving what time it is and the way that the satellite is. And that's like that. There is complications that come into that, and it's not. That's the most complicated part about it, but it doesn't have anything to do with changing the speed of light. It just has to do with what's the difference between the time that you think it is and the time the clock thinks it is from the space satellite. But if you think about it as all occurring in the reference frame of the receiver, there's no difference in the speed of light. It's all in the same frame already, so there's no difference in the speed of light. And I wish I could show this. Maybe I can. Give me a second.
Yeah, can I jump in here? So all reference frames should be equally valid, meaning that if the speed of light was the same, then the distance derived should be the same under transformation. And it's not. It requires corrections. That violates Lorentz covariance, the mathematical structure upon which the postulates, have to conform to mathematically to verify the claim that all reference frames are the same.
Alan, you
So,
you understand what I'm saying when I say that the correct, like where the corrections are needed. Like the corrections aren't needed in that there's a difference in the speed of light. The corrections are needed in the fact that these two clocks. One of the clocks, by the way, has four atomic clocks or four. It's got four clocks attached to it, and so it's got four ways to get an exact time. But that plus it's moving quicker than the one on Earth. Your phone or your receiver is going to be a different clock. So the clock corrections are purely a flaw in your receiving device. It has no way due to the timing of the where it's transmitted from. So there's
clock,
no. Yeah, go ahead.
the clock corrections are solely due to the Sagnac effect. That's the only correction necessary that keeps them in alignment.
We will elaborate on that.
Yeah, one sec. I'll get you the equation for it.
Oh yeah, the equation. But I'm saying, elaborate on where you're saying that the corrections come from, because like I said, the corrections, as far as I
So,
understand, come from the receiver
yes,
and the
yeah. So,
the
right.
receiver.
Okay, got you. Yeah. So the preferred direction for the propagation of light causes is what causes the clocks to go out of sync, even in a stationary reference frame. And when you're moving, it experiences electromagnetic retardation, in the same sense. So the correction that they're making, right, the compensation that they're doing is they have an equation that's equivalent to the range measurement equation, Sagnac equation, the circular derivation, and the linear. And all it's doing is it's compensating for that electromagnetic retardation, or what would be the opposite of retardation where it's accelerating it. So anyway, whatever the inverse of that would be, that's all it's compensating for relative to the latitude. So, and again, they're all synced to the same time, GPS time. So the information encoded in it, all in the same reference frame, yada, yada. It should be an invariant transformation. And like, I know it's getting very circular and I feel like we're talking past each other. No, it's not a
Alan,
relativistic effect, Scott. Yeah.
I tell you, this conversation, I can't continue because I have to only listen at this point. But I do enjoy where this is going, and I hope we can continue this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I remember where we left off of. We definitely have a difference of opinion on the differences where these corrections come into play, because I think we have a very different idea of where these corrections come from, or where they're being applied to. Having said that, though, I can't continue at this moment. But
You know, it would be fire
just-
is if you guys did an event. If you guys did an event, a Kosho and Alan discussion event, if you guys wanted to, that would be awesome. We could put it on the schedule whenever you guys are free for it.
Yeah,
It could
it's one
basically
of my
just be,
passions.
it could just be you two, like, yeah, just no one else interrupting, no one else jumping in, just you guys, you know, for hour or two, whatever you want to do, to hash this through. That would be a great event if you guys want to do it.
No, yeah, it's just cool, man. Alan's a cool guy, and GPS is one of my favorite subjects in this arena. And I just want to say, just to leave it off, I just want to just make it clear. I'm stating that the corrections with the relativistic corrections come in with the difference between the clocks with the satellites and the clocks with the receiver, but they don't come in with a difference in speed of light with this kind of thing. The speed of light and the measurement of the distance are 100% in the frame of the receiver, and the receiver has it uses the time it gets from the satellite. It uses that time in its own reference frame as a description of the position of that satellite in its reference. So I just want to make that clear that I think that's the difference between what we're saying is where the corrections come in. Whereas I think he's saying that the corrections come in kind of like the varying speed of light and that kind of thing. Where I think that's the distance is only described in the frame of the receiver. Yeah, sorry, I don't want to strongman you.
Oh no, sorry. Sorry, I tuned out. You're good, bro. I was typing to dude in chat for some reason. I got sidetracked. That was my fault. I got sucked into talking to the non-talkers.
I do think it's crazy that both me and Alan, we both have a fucking GPS guy called Wang now. I can't get over that. We have like a legit GPS guy, and his name's Wang.
So, Kosho, you don't think the speed of light has to do with that ping time, though? You're trying to say it's only
No.
based-
I'm talking strictly about the correction, the relativistic corrections made in GPS. Like in GPS, in the signal you get, there's a relativistic correction. The correction has nothing to do with the speed of light variance. It has only to do with the variance in the clocks from the receiver and the transmitting craft. It's complicated, Geo. I got to jump in the shower now.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, just hit me up whenever he wants to schedule that. I'm available pretty much anytime. I can conform to anything.
Nice. Yeah, Kosho, if you're still at your mic, would you want to do an event where you guys could actually go through all this?
Yeah, we can. But to be honest with you, unofficial stuff is cool too because I don't want to make a big deal out of it. But I would like to hear.
Well, it sounds like you
I'll
guys.
be listening.
Well, there's some fundamental differences in what is being discussed. And the thing is, Kosho, is that you have claimed that the GPS can be used to accurately measure the shape of the Earth. In terms, you guys have done it with Sonley's bridge. So it is one of the things that you claim, but it's not only you. It's not really about you or Sonley or any of that. There also is obviously the largest situation in the world that GPS is regarded as what it is in the mainstream. And then they do use that in terms of their claim of the globe Earth and curvature and so on. So it's relevant on multiple levels.
But it's important to understand that in Alan's understanding, the same is true. That's what I was trying to. That's what I was trying to point out at the beginning. Is regardless, like mine and Alan's disagreement about how GPS works has nothing to do with GPS's ability to be useful in this arena, because even in Alan's understanding of how GPS works, you could still use it to get centimeter accurate positioning.
Yeah, but I'll show you how
So-
I'll show you how that's not the case. Alan, do you think that GPS can be used to accurately measure the shape of the Earth or the curvature of water or any of those type things?
I don't see how it could measure curvature of water. It's based off line of sight propagation.
And Kosho, what is your answer to that? It is. He said no.
Can I-
You're saying
Has
yeah.
a follow up? Has a follow up question?
No, I'm
follow-up
asking you.
question.
No, hold on. I'm showing how you guys
Come
have
on.
different viewpoint. He's saying he just responded. So, but you do think it can be used for that?
Yes, I do think that. Yes, I am.
Right. So that's at the crux of, yeah. And then all of the knowledge and information you both have on it, I think it could be very fruitful to see where the truth
Right.
lies, as it were.
So Gio wasn't being fair there, though, because I think in fairness, the question should have been: is do you think GPS can give you centimeter accurate positioning? That should have been the question.
Down to the millimeter.
Down to
Instantaneously.
the millimeter. Thank you, Alan. And I think with that question, by the way, everybody knows that in geometry, if you have 2 points, you can make a straight line. So if you have 2 points where you can get millimeter accurate positioning, then you can make a straight line that's extremely accurate. This is just another thing. So that's what I'm saying, is that even though me and Alan may disagree on how GPS works or what it proves or doesn't prove, we both agree that it can indeed make straight lines that can indeed be useful in this arena. So that question was misleading, Gio. I'll just say that. But
No, dude. Okay, my understanding of it is that there are foundational flaws in the way GPS is designed that eradicate its potential to be used as an accurate measuring system. When you look at the whole of the system, and we don't have the access. I would add this in my viewpoint: we don't have the access to validate how they're actually doing those transformations and those adjustments, as it were, on the back end. So even though, yes, you could maybe measure one line or two lines that are accurate within a certain region, but to depend on it as a total system that is accurate to those millimeter levels at all positions on Earth would be where the problem is. And you're saying it can be used as that, as a sort of trustable system in that way. And of course, the mainstream essentially is saying that as well to a degree. But what Alan is pointing out, in my viewpoint, shows the foundational system of how it is built and the positions at which there's flaws in terms of what would be needed for it to be the case if it was an accurate system and could be used for that level of consistency, especially over long distances of the Earth.
Yeah, just to tag on the back of that, and not to gish gallop on you, but yeah, sorry, to add clarification. Yeah, so the fact that the first order measurement that accurately drives the distance down to the millimeter in the first reference frame, the fact that it requires corrections kind of puts it out the window in terms of accuracy for determining reciprocal zenith angles with the GPS, because the distance, is obviously going to reflect back on a globe when you're referencing that after the corrections are applied to it. So like the validity of it, I would say, goes out the window because first order measurements should not have to be corrected. And actually, it's the correction of that breaks down the entire system. But yeah, sorry, I misunderstood kind of what you were saying in terms of measuring curvature of water. I thought you meant like the signal propagating in a straight line, like, over a set altitude or something.
Well, I mean, ultimately, Kosho has claimed that that they have measured the bridge at Lake Pontchartrain to be curving to the curve of the Earth with GPS. That's the claim. Kosho didn't do it. It's claimed to have been done.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd have to hear how they came about that.
And then Kosho also, yeah. Are you still at your mic, Kosho, or did you bounce? Because he also talks about this other way to get the raw data. He has
Oh.
a whole thing on the raw data.
I've been urging my girlfriend to stop doing what she's doing. But yeah, go ahead. I might have some more time. Time, Gio. What's going on?
Well, you think that GPS can be used to measure curved water, right? And curved bridges over a globe Earth?
Yeah, all that kind of stuff, yeah. Listen, here's the thing. Me and Alan both just agreed. We all agreed. It can make millimeter accurate positions, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter where they are. If you have millimeter accurate positions, you can get perfectly precise straight lines, and you can measure the Earth in reference to those straight lines. That's just that's it. You can measure. You can create horizontals in which you can measure to see if the Earth curves away from them. So that's what I'm talking about.
How would you describe how you and Alan disagree?
Like, we do disagree on that. On that, we don't.
Yeah,
I
but
don't
what do you disagree about?
On how GPS works and what it does, what it infers and what it doesn't infer. I
Well,
think,
what's the
like I
difference?
said, he believes that it infers a discrepancy with relativity, and or relativity infers that GPS doesn't work, whereas I claim that that's not the case.
I'm not sure that's his position. He's not. I don't think he's saying that relativity is saying that GPS doesn't work. I think it's the
Right.
opposite.
He's saying,
Like,
exactly. That's what I just said. He's inferring that GPS shows that relativity doesn't work, or the opposite. So it's probably the other case. He believes that GPS shows that relativity is actually not the case, is what his claim is my understanding.
I don't think it's a belief, though. I think it's just the way that they do the readings with an absolute reference frame.
Yeah, and I understand it to not be the case because, as I've already stated this, the discrepancy with relativity is not in the reading, but instead in the clock corrections between the receiver and the transmitter. Is how I understand it. But again, this is
So your interpretation of I think it's the difference. I'm just trying to pinpoint the difference between you guys. Like, if you ever had like a talking point of like, if I want to describe like why you guys disagree to somebody, would it be about the interpretation of reason for the corrections or the actual way the corrections are done?
sorry, I'm just laughing at my buddy Scott Veach. I wish somebody could tag this guy in real quick. I'm gonna tag Scott Veach in real quick.
He was in
Do you
VC,
guys?
but he was in
Do you
VC.
guys? The question is, Kosho, do you guys disagree about the way the actual readings are taken, or is it more about a disagreement about the reason that the corrections are done?
I don't know, man. Let me just take a shower real quick. Let me listen. Sorry.
Yeah, that'd be cool if Veach I mean, instead of just going back and forth in the chat so everybody else could hear what you guys are disagreeing on, or even Lucas, I guess.
Oh yeah, because Veach was the one that originally. Remember, he actually stayed when this was all fully.
Yeah,
and
he,
hitting, and like he actually stayed and was willing to. He was actually the only one at some of those, at least one of those whole nights of presentation where he actually was willing to look into it. He said he'll look into it and get back in a few weeks.
yeah, but he wasn't like he stayed through the presentation. Everybody else left, and then he showed up afterwards. It seemed like he stayed, but he didn't really stay.
Yeah, so he just asked in chat. He says reading a bunch of debunks of Wang that seem to say that the closed loops are interpreted by Minkowski space-time. Do I have a response to that? I don't even understand. I don't know how that would even how that helps the situation. You'd have to further articulate what specifically about Minkowski space-time invalidates it, or I don't understand what you're even saying, to be honest with you. You'd have to show me the reference, and I'll decipher it. Is he here?
Well, he's obviously listening on YouTube because he's talking about Kosho getting in the shower and stuff. So he
Oh, gotcha.
He's listening, but probably he was in the VC, I think, a few minutes ago, but I don't see him in here right now. So yeah, Beach, if you're listening, just join VC. I could type it out, tell him that too. But yeah, unless he can't be on the mic or whatever. Yeah. Because trying to text that all out. How closed loops are interpreted Minkowski space.
Minkowski.
So Minkowski space just interprets it, everything as like a hyperbola or whatever. So I don't know how that helps the situation, because the effect was shown to be directionally dependent. So it's not due to an angular effect. And if it's not due to an angular effect and it happens in an inertial frame, then special relativity has to apply to it, and it thereby invalidates it. And due from the equivalence principle, which Einstein linked to special and general relativity with, it invalidates both frameworks of interpretation. So to say that another interpretation of space-time, the fourth dimensional geometric interpretation of it, that doesn't really help things, right? Because Einstein's interpretation of it was just forcing the answers out of algebraic equations, making the coordinate system conform. Minkowski just kind of interpreted it as a hyperbola and made the transformations he gave covariance to the transformations by adding the time axis to it and saying that it's a hyperbola, so that the scaling of distance and time would scale proportionally under transformation, because they have to be in sync, because that's what spacetime is. So that was his contribution to it. That doesn't really help your case.
Yeah, I don't know if did he actually read Wang, or did he just read the debunks?
I mean, it be what it be, right?
I just look at stop laughing about the fucking fact that we both got GPS wangs, dude. How many GPS wangs can there be?
Coach, do you see how it would be possible that a GPS system could give accurate results? Because if you're going off the idea, like if you were to set like a known distance, with a physical measurement, and then you were to use GPS and get that accuracy, do you agree or disagree with the potential that could be accurate in certain instances, but other times, like that doesn't necessarily mean that it's accurate like that across all time and space, as it were, everywhere? Just because it's accurate in one instance does not necessarily mean that it's universally accurate, especially on all areas and coordinates within the Earth system.
Let's be real accurate. The only reason that differential GPS is accurate is because it's cross-referenced. So they take a base station. So in Australia, they have a bunch of, the guy Wang, he's got a bunch of Australian base stations. In America, we have a lot more base stations. And there's positions that they've already calculated and pinpointed in their reference system what those positions are. And so what they do is, when you do these corrections, they take the position that they have for that position, which is the exact position, and they take the measured position. So they use the GPS to measure that position again. And there's going to be some discrepancy. And they use that differential, which is what's called differential GPS, and then they apply it to your receiver. So you take a receiver's position for your position, and it applies the same correction for your position. And when done over the course of bunches of times a second, it will give you a very precise correction for your position. I hope this makes sense, but it should make sense that it's basically taking the position it's giving you and the position that you are, and it's gaining that from the position that the receiving position is getting, and I'm sorry, the base station position is getting, and the base position. Oh, eBay. Somebody tag me in, please. It just works. Right? It works. I'll be back.
Dude, I was with you all the way up to the Oy vey. I was with you, but
I know. Yeah. Well, it's just too much work. Gio, help me out.
I don't hear you say that often, so that was a new one. But all right. Yeah, I mean, you had it till there, and then something happened. You spun out at the end there. But yeah, I mean, it is constantly adjusting. It's constantly pinging positions and adjusting the result as you move, which is you could see on a GPS screen and all that as you move. It can continually updating and making the corrections.
Well, yeah, the triangulation to that though is secondary to the effect of how the measurement is taken in the ECI frame though. Like it instantly derives the distance. That's the same equation that they use in sonar. Like there's no correction. That's why it's a first order measurement. Like that's the whole situation with that, right? Like the understanding of that being a first order measurement. It requires no corrections, no assumptions, no alterations, under those conditions that it was derived under. So and the fact that it's accurate down to the millimeter using a varying speed of light in a stationary reference frame in which it could measure the relative speed against a stationary fixed position, is, undermines the entire argument that it's complicated or requires additional corrections, et cetera, because the whole thing should uniformly translate to any coordinate system with no corrections necessary. That's the whole point of GPS being a time interval system rather than a system that derives distance the traditional way. So assume, we live on an oblate ellipsoid or whatever they say it is. The coordinate system over distances will be different slightly because it'll be like some planar spots and there'll be some spherical spots or whatever. So, maybe this area locally could be considered flat, and then moving out from that, it would be, spherical in nature or whatever. So if you had to do like pinpoint accuracy for strategic military attacks or something like that, you would need a way to just uniformly have the distance, under all circumstances, no matter what. And that's exactly what the range measurement equation in the ECI reference frame does and provides the instant derivation of the distance. That's what you would use in a like missile detection system, right? So like, yeah, you're going to be constantly updating and stuff, right? But as soon as that signal hits, it knows it's like, okay, it was right here. And then it hits another one. It's like, okay, it's right there. And then, and so on and so forth. Like that's how it goes. It's not complicated at all. It's very straightforward.
So then do you think they could use that to get accurate positions, like what I'm talking about, like the high levels of the military and so on? They actually can use it in the form that actually would be accurate for themselves, meaning they could, target missiles or bombs or whatever it may be, just tracking us on the earth and stuff, that they actually could. Do you think they could actually have like two simultaneous systems, like the real one that actually is showing the accurate, layout of everything? And
Yeah,
then,
absolutely.
yeah. And then,
yeah. So
yeah.
yeah, no, they totally do. So before GPS was released to the public, its initial setup was set up in such a way that if it were to be used by anyone outside of the military or whatever, it wouldn't be like accurate or whatever. So they released a version or whatever that for civilian use, like, yeah, they absolutely have their own version with accurate distances and stuff in different coordinate systems. This is also noted by ring laser gyros in their, the inertial guidance systems that they use, the same one that Bob used for the thanks Bob. So actually, when that system detects that it's at, and by detects, I don't mean like it just magically knows where it is. I mean from a combination of factors telling it where it's at on the coordinate system. But anyway, when it determines that it passes the 85th latitude in the north, and I forget what the south one is, the 65th one in the south, it switches to Arctic or polar mode and Antarctic mode, in their respective latitudes. So they transform to an entirely different coordinate system when they're in those latitudes. So like, who knows what they do or how they operate? But like, if this is all built in to the systems, that we have no idea, like the what's it called, like the source code for them. You know what I mean? So like we can't derive how they're navigating at these latitudes to like verify anything that's on Google Earth or anything like that. And uh, like Shane was saying, so the way the GPS is set up and with the corrections that they apply to the first order measurements, it invalidates the the what's it called, like the authenticity of reciprocal GPS angles to prove, you know, curvature over distances and stuff. Like you would never, because they correct it. Like it just like, what did they correct? What did they add to it? Are they cooking it in? What specifically, right? So it's already in question the fact that the first order measurement itself needs correction.
Yeah. So in a way, would that potentially delineate a bit, like with Kosho, in terms of him trying to lay out his understanding of it and how it could be, it actually is accurate? Is he, in a sense, could it be said that he may be describing the one that they have that is accurate and the technology behind it, because there are certain components to how that works and so on, but the additional component that the civilian one that they give us, perhaps, or whatever it is that that we have access to, as it were, has, if I'm, it's not really a steel man because we're not really debating, but I'm just trying to kind of summarize it maybe in a way to where, could it be that what you could perhaps continue to supporting to illuminate is that, like, if I'm trying, I don't want to like straw man you or anything, but is there
You're good, bro.
a way in which you're suggesting that, like, that there's a flaw in the way that the logic order of the information and what systems it goes through and the coordinate transforms, to where there is a clear spot in which they could alter and adjust it because of the ECI, the Earth-centered fixed reference frame, versus what they claim it is when they sell the globe model to us, that it then invalidates it as being a secure system to be able to glean those types of continued first order measurements that would be needed to get, to have it be validated and to have it be accurate.
Mm.
Because you were agreeing that they could have a version of it that is accurate. So you're not saying the whole thing is not accurate, because Kosho is saying it could be accurate to actually measure the shape of the Earth, or he's saying it is. But you just were saying, well, yeah, it could be possible from your understanding of the whole technology that they could have a system that is actually accurate the way Kosho is saying, but they're like, why then would that not be the one we have? Or could we have one that isn't all accurate because what they can do on the back end?
Yeah, so with the corrections on the back end, it invalidates it being like a primary like a good source. You know what I mean? Because the fact that it requires another correction to it. So what they could be doing with those corrections would be, you know, over short distances where you're using it to navigate to go to work, right? It's going to be super accurate. But over long distances where you try and compare it, that's where that's where they could cook in things like where it would be like, oh, it's longer because it has to go, you know, over Earth curvature and that sort of stuff, and it would produce what would be the equivalent of reciprocal GPS measurements, where Kosho was kind of saying that, like, you know, it would be like a measurement of a building being tilted away from another one. So like that's kind of what they're saying, and that would be facilitated through the corrections relative to the coordinate system that we're using, right? So uh, the fact that it's not the same first order measurement, and like, you know, puts the whole thing into question, because we don't have access to those back end corrections, but we know that they take place because they admit it, and all electromagnetic propagation reveals its necessity, and, you know, GPS explicitly functions on the fact that the speed of light delay, or yeah, the electromagnetic propagation delay is proportional to the velocity of the observer. So, you know, like I think he thinks that the corrections he thinks that the post calculation corrections are okay, and that it doesn't that it's all on the up and up. I think that's where we differ a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and that can, yeah. I don't want to speak for him. I don't know whether he's still listening or not, but yeah, that does sound like a good representation of my general understanding of his position on it, which
Yeah.
does come from some accurate understanding of the technology. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, even Wang cites that, it instantaneously derives like with the range measurement equation. That's what is showing the variance, right? Because those atomic clocks are so accurate. Like, they're measuring it down to what is 14.014 microseconds. So that's like 14 1 millionths of a second or something like that. Like, it's ridiculous. But yeah, it's showing the variance in the speed of light, which which is the problem.
What is do you have any idea what the whole thing with Doofus here and the BC is about the military? Did you already cover that? I wasn't paying attention. Military GPS time.
Yeah, the question about is it possible that the military is using a different coordinate system that more accurately represents the signals when they're sent and received, and the answer is yes. It would be advantageous to do so, like like you wouldn't want the public having the same exact pinpoint accuracy, right? What if some guy wanted to get a box cutter and or do an attack or something with airplanes and GPS?
Yeah, there's a bunch. Yeah.
Why doesn't
there's a
Doofus
bunch
just
of-
come in and defend himself?
What was that? Whoa. Who kosher? Oh, Doofus. Oh, yeah. Well,